Your son's fiancée isn't who she claims to be. When the wedding planner said those words 6 months after the ceremony, my heart stopped. But what she showed me next made my blood run cold, and the decision I made afterward changed everything. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end and comment what country you're watching from so I can see how far my story reaches. I never imagined that at 70 years old, I'd be standing in the middle of the biggest deception of my life. My name is Beatrice Caldwell, and this is the story of how my son's perfect wedding turned into a nightmare I never saw coming. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I missed, all the little inconsistencies I brushed aside because I was so desperate to see my son happy. But hindsight is a cruel teacher, and the lessons I learned came at a price I'm still paying. It started on a crisp autumn evening 18 months ago. I was living in my modest two-bedroom home in Asheville, North Carolina, the same house my late husband Thomas and I had purchased 40 years earlier. The leaves were turning brilliant shades of orange and gold, and I was preparing my famous pot roast for Sunday dinner, a tradition I'd maintained even after Thomas passed away 7 years ago. My son Nathaniel was coming over, which always filled my heart with warmth. At 38 years old, he was everything a mother could hope for: kind, successful, thoughtful. He worked as an environmental engineer for a firm in Charlotte, about 2 hours away, but he made the drive almost every other weekend to spend time with me. After his devastating divorce 6 years earlier, I worried he might never open his heart to love again. He threw himself into his work, moved to Charlotte for a fresh start, and built walls around his heart that seemed impossible to breach. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 p.m. Nathaniel was always punctual, a trait he'd inherited from his father. But when I opened the door, I immediately noticed something different about him. His hazel eyes were sparkling with an excitement I hadn't seen in years, and he had the kind of smile that suggested he was holding on to the world's best secret. "Mom," he said, wrapping me in one of his bear hugs that still made me feel like he was my little boy, "I have the most incredible news." We settled into the living room, and he couldn't even wait until dinner to tell me. He sat on the edge of the old leather sofa that had been his father's favorite spot and took my hands in his. "I've met someone, Mom. Her name is Celestina, and I think she might be the one. Actually, I know she is." The hope that bloomed in my chest was almost painful. After watching Nathaniel go through the heartbreak of his first marriage, his ex-wife Monica had left him for her personal trainer after only 3 years, I'd worried he might never open his heart to love again. He threw himself into his work, moved to Charlotte for a fresh start, and built walls around his heart that seemed impossible to breach. "Tell me everything," I said, squeezing his hands. His face lit up as he described her. They had met 4 months earlier at a charity gala in Charlotte that his company had sponsored. Celestina had been there representing what she called a nonprofit organization focused on art therapy for trauma survivors. They'd struck up a conversation about environmental conservation, discovered they both loved hiking, and had been inseparable ever since. "She's incredible, Mom. Beautiful, yes, but it's so much more than that. She's compassionate, intelligent, and she has this way of making everything feel more meaningful. After Monica, I didn't think I'd ever trust anyone again. But Celestina, she's different." I wanted to meet her immediately, of course. Nathaniel promised to bring her to dinner the following weekend. Those 7 days felt eternal. I found myself daydreaming about grandchildren, about family holidays that felt whole again, about having a daughter figure in my life. My own daughter, Claire, lived in Seattle with her family, and while we talked regularly, the distance meant I only saw her twice a year. When the day finally arrived, I must have changed my outfit 4 times. I wanted to make the right impression, to show this woman who'd captured my son's heart that she was welcomed into our family. I prepared all of Nathaniel's favorite dishes: my special rosemary chicken, homemade buttermilk biscuits, green beans with almonds, and my famous bourbon pecan pie. The doorbell rang at 5:30 p.m., and I took a deep breath before opening it. Celestina Ashford was breathtaking. She stood about 5 feet 8 inches tall, with thick auburn hair that cascaded in waves past her shoulders. Her eyes were an unusual shade of amber, almost gold in the late afternoon light. She wore an elegant emerald dress that looked expensive but not ostentatious, and she carried a stunning bouquet of autumn flowers. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said, her voice warm and melodious, with just a hint of what sounded like a southern accent. "I'm so honored to finally meet you. Nathaniel speaks of you constantly." She handed me the flowers and then, to my surprise, pulled me into a gentle embrace. It felt genuine, not forced or overly familiar, just warm. "Please, call me Beatrice," I said, already charmed. Come in. Dinner's almost ready." That first evening set the tone for everything that followed. Celestina was perfect, and I mean that in every sense of the word. She complimented my home, admired the photos of Thomas that still decorated the mantel, and asked thoughtful questions about our family history. She helped me set the table without being asked, insisted on doing the dishes afterward, and seemed genuinely interested in every story I told.
"Beatrice," she said as we sat together on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. "I want you to know that family means everything to me. My own mother passed away when I was young, and my father remarried someone who, well, let's just say we never connected. Meeting you, seeing how close you and Nathaniel are, it makes me feel like I might finally have the mother-daughter relationship I've always dreamed of." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she spoke, and my heart broke for her. I reached over and took her hand. "You're part of this family now," I told her. "As far as I'm concerned, you already are." Over the next 3 months, Celestina became a constant presence in our lives. She'd drive down from Charlotte with Nathaniel almost every weekend. We'd go to farmers markets together, work in my garden, and have long conversations over coffee about everything from books to politics to her work with the nonprofit. She told me she'd grown up in Savannah, Georgia, in a wealthy family. Her mother had died of cancer when Celestina was 12, and her father, Preston Ashford, had remarried within a year to a woman named Victoria, who'd had little interest in raising someone else's child. Celestina had been sent to boarding schools in New England, then attended Vanderbilt University, where she'd studied art history. She'd worked in various nonprofit organizations since graduating, always focused on helping people heal through creative expression. The story was detailed, consistent, and utterly convincing. She showed me photos on her phone, childhood pictures of her with a beautiful dark-haired woman she identified as her mother, photos from her boarding school days, graduation pictures from Vanderbilt. Everything checked out. Everything seemed real. In early December, Nathaniel called me with news that made my heart soar. "Mom, I'm going to propose to Celestina on Christmas Eve. I wanted you to be the first to know. I've already bought the ring. It was Grandma Ruth's diamond that Dad gave you to keep for me." I'd been saving my mother-in-law's stunning vintage engagement ring for this exact moment. It was a beautiful Art Deco piece with a central diamond surrounded by sapphires, worth far more now than when Ruth had first worn it in 1945. "Oh, Nathaniel," I breathed. "She's going to say yes, I know it. I'm so happy for you, sweetheart." Christmas Eve was magical. Nathaniel had arranged for us all to have dinner at the Grove Park Inn, one of Asheville's most historic and romantic locations. After dessert, he got down on one knee, right there in the dining room, and proposed with his grandmother's ring glittering under the chandelier light. Celestina cried, beautiful, delicate tears that didn't even smudge her makeup, and said yes. The entire restaurant applauded. She immediately came to me, still crying, and hugged me tight. "Thank you for raising such an incredible man," she whispered in my ear. "Thank you for welcoming me. I promise I'll make him happy every single day." I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. The engagement period was a whirlwind of joy and excitement. Celestina wanted a spring wedding, and she threw herself into planning with the kind of enthusiasm that made me love her even more. She asked for my input on everything: the venue, the flowers, the menu, even her dress selection. I know some brides push their mother-in-law away during wedding planning, she told me one afternoon as we looked at invitation samples in her and Nathaniel's apartment in Charlotte. But you're not just my mother-in-law, Beatrice. You're the mother I always wished I'd had. I want you involved in every decision. We settled on a May wedding at the Biltmore Estate in Asheville. It was expensive. The venue alone cost nearly $15,000, but Celestina assured me that her father was covering most of the costs. The total budget was somewhere around $95,000, which seemed astronomical to me, but Celestina insisted it was what her father wanted. He feels guilty about how distant we've been, she explained. This is his way of trying to make up for all those years. Please don't worry about the cost, Beatrice. Dad has the money, and he wants to do this. I met Preston Ashford in February when he flew in from Savannah for a weekend visit. He was a distinguished-looking man in his late 60s with silver hair and the bearing of old Southern money. He wore expensive suits, spoke with a cultured accent, and seemed genuinely fond of both Celestina and Nathaniel. He told me, "Mr. Caldwell would have been proud of the man Nathaniel has become, and I'm grateful my daughter found someone so solid and dependable. After some of the mistakes she's made in the past, she deserves this happiness." I didn't ask about those mistakes. It seemed rude to pry into Celestina's past. Everyone had history, and what mattered was the present. Celestina hired a wedding planner in March. Someone she said came highly recommended from a colleague at the nonprofit. Her name was Josephine Reeves, and I met her only briefly at our first major planning meeting. Josephine was in her mid-40s with sharp features and an efficient manner that inspired confidence. She worked out of a small but elegant office in downtown Asheville and seemed to have connections with every high-end vendor in the region. "Mrs. Caldwell," Josephine said when we first met, shaking my hand with a firm grip, "I understand you'll be heavily involved in the planning process. I want you to know my door is always open if you have questions or concerns. This is a family celebration, and I'm here to make sure everyone feels heard." She seemed professional and competent, if perhaps a bit reserved. But wedding planners dealt with stressed brides and complicated family dynamics all the time. I didn't think much of her somewhat cool demeanor. The months leading up to the wedding flew by in a blur of cake tastings, flower selections, and dress fittings. Celestina included me in almost everything, often asking my opinion before making final decisions. We spent hours together, and I felt our bond growing stronger with each passing week. She'd call me at least 3 times a week, sometimes just to chat about nothing in particular. She remembered small details about my life, that I volunteered at the library on Tuesdays, that I attended a watercolor painting class on Thursday mornings, that I loved old Hollywood movies from the 1940s. She'd send me articles about classic films or leave small gifts on my doorstep, a vintage movie poster, a book about Golden Age actresses. A beautiful scarf, she said, reminded her of me. "You've given me so much," she told me one afternoon in April as we worked together in my garden, planting the roses that would bloom just in time for the wedding. "You've made me feel loved and wanted in a way I haven't felt since my mother died. I want you to know that means everything to me." I actually cried that day, kneeling there in the dirt with my hands covered in soil, overwhelmed by the gratitude I felt for this woman who'd brought such joy back into my son's life and into mine. There were a few small things that struck me as odd, though I pushed them aside at the time. Like the fact that Celestina never wanted to video call with her father. She always said he was old-fashioned and preferred phone calls. Or how she sometimes seemed vague about details of her childhood, changing small elements of stories she'd told before. Or the way she'd tense up whenever Nathaniel suggested visiting Savannah to see her family home. "There are too many painful memories there," she'd say. "Maybe after the wedding, when I feel more settled. Right now I just want to focus on our future, not my past." It seemed reasonable. Understandable, even. I'd lost Thomas 7 years ago, and there were still places in Asheville I avoided because the memories were too sharp. The wedding day arrived under perfect May skies. The Biltmore estate looked like something out of a fairy tale, with the Blue Ridge Mountains providing a stunning backdrop. The ceremony was planned for the estate's rose garden, with the reception to follow in one of the grand ballrooms. I woke up that morning with tears of joy already forming. My son was getting married to a wonderful woman. Life felt full of promise and hope. The morning was spent in happy chaos. I helped Celestina get ready in the bridal suite, along with her 4 bridesmaids, women she'd introduced as friends from her nonprofit work and college days. They all seemed nice, if a bit formal with me. But I was the groom's mother, after all. It made sense they'd be more focused on Celestina. When Celestina emerged in her wedding dress, a stunning ivory gown with delicate lace sleeves and a cathedral train, I couldn't hold back my tears. "You look like a princess," I told her, my voice breaking. "You look like a princess. Nathaniel is the luckiest man in the world." She hugged me carefully, mindful of her dress and makeup. "I'm the lucky one, Beatrice. I found Nathaniel and I found you. You've both given me a family I never thought I'd have." The ceremony began at 4 p.m. Over 250 guests filled the white chairs arranged in perfect rows facing the rose arbor. I sat in the front row watching my handsome son stand at the altar in his charcoal gray tuxedo, his face radiating happiness and nervous excitement. When the music swelled and Celestina appeared at the entrance to the garden on her father's arm, a collective gasp went through the crowd. She was absolutely radiant, moving down the aisle with grace and poise. Preston's face was stoic, almost stern, which I attributed to the normal emotions of a father giving away their daughter. The ceremony itself was beautiful. They'd written their own vows, and Celestina's were particularly moving. "Nathaniel," she said, her voice clear and strong, despite the emotion in her eyes, "you found me when I was lost. You gave me hope when I'd forgotten what that felt like. You showed me that good men still exist in this world, that love doesn't have to hurt, that family can be chosen as much as it's given. I promise to honor you, to support you, and to build a life with you that's worthy of the trust you've placed in me." I actually cried through the entire ceremony. So did many of the guests. It was perfect, absolutely perfect. The reception was elegant and joyful. The ballroom was decorated with thousands of roses and shades of cream and blush pink. The food was exquisite, the champagne flowed freely, and a 12-piece band kept everyone dancing. Preston had spared no expense, and it showed in every detail. I danced with Nathaniel during the mother-son dance, holding my boy close as we swayed to "What a Wonderful World." He looked down at me with so much love. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered. "Thank you for being happy for me. After Monica, I know you worried I'd never find this again, but Celestina is everything I ever hoped for. She's genuine, she's kind, and she loves me for who I am, not what I can give her." "I can see that, sweetheart," I told him, meaning every word. "She's wonderful. You're going to have a beautiful life together." Later in the evening, as guests mingled and danced, Celestina found me near the dessert table. She pulled me aside, away from the crowd, and took both of her hands in hers.
"Beatrice, I need to tell you something," she said, her amber eyes intense and sincere. "I know I haven't always had the easiest life. I know there are things in my past that I'm not proud of, mistakes I've made. But Nathaniel has given me a chance to start over, to be the person I always wanted to be. And you've shown me what it means to be a real mother. I promise you, I will spend every day of my life making sure your son is loved and happy. I will never take for granted what I've found in this family." The intensity of her words, the emotion behind them, moved me deeply.
I hugged her tight, this beautiful woman who'd become like a daughter to me. "I know you will, sweetheart," I said. "Welcome to the family, officially." As the evening wound down and the newlyweds prepared to leave for their honeymoon in Tuscany, I stood with the other guests outside the estate, throwing rose petals as they drove away in a vintage Rolls-Royce decorated with "Just Married" ribbons. It was perfect, a fairy tale, a dream come true. I had absolutely no idea that every single moment of it had been carefully orchestrated, that the woman driving away with my son wasn't named Celestina Ashford, that her father wasn't really her father, that the entire foundation of their relationship was built on lies so elaborate and calculated that they'd taken years to construct. I didn't know that 6 months later, I'd get a phone call that would shatter everything I believed about my son's perfect marriage. But that night, standing under the stars as the car disappeared down the winding estate driveway, I was simply a happy mother watching her son begin his happily ever after. The first few months after the wedding were blissful in every way. Nathaniel and Celestina returned from their Italian honeymoon glowing and full of stories about wine tastings in Tuscany and gondola rides in Venice. They'd found a beautiful house in Myers Park, one of Charlotte's most prestigious neighborhoods, a gorgeous colonial revival with white columns and a wraparound porch. The house cost $850,000, which seemed like an enormous amount to me, but Celestina explained that she'd sold some property in Savannah that her mother had left her, and combined with Nathaniel's savings and a portion of money from her father, they'd been able to make a substantial down payment. I visited them often, making the 2-hour drive to Charlotte at least twice a month. Each time I arrived, the house looked more beautiful. Celestina had exquisite taste, decorating with a mix of antiques and modern pieces that created an atmosphere of comfortable elegance. She always welcomed me warmly, often having my favorite tea prepared and a guest room made up just in case I wanted to stay overnight. We'd spend afternoons together while Nathaniel was at work, shopping for furniture, working in her new garden, or just talking over coffee in her sun-filled kitchen. "This is everything I ever dreamed of," she told me one September afternoon as we planted mums in her front flower beds. "A beautiful home, a man I love, and a mother-in-law who's become my best friend. Sometimes I worry it's too good to be true." Her words gave me a small chill, though I dismissed it immediately. Why would she say something like that? "It's not too good to be true," I assured her. "You deserve all of this, Celestina. You've worked hard, you've overcome difficulties in your past, and now you're reaping the rewards. Enjoy it." She smiled, but something in her amber eyes seemed sad, distant. In October, Nathaniel called me with news that made my heart soar even higher. "Mom, Celestina is pregnant. We just found out yesterday. We weren't trying yet, but we're both absolutely thrilled. You're going to be a grandmother again." I actually screamed with joy. My daughter Claire had 2 children, but they lived so far away in Seattle that I only saw them a couple times a year. The thought of having a grandchild nearby, being able to be involved in their life, watching them grow up, it was more than I dared to hope for. When I drove to Charlotte that weekend to celebrate, Celestina seemed overwhelmed with happiness, but also strangely emotional. She cried several times, which I attributed to pregnancy hormones. "I'm so scared, Beatrice," she admitted as we sat together in her living room. "What if I'm not a good mother? What if I make the same mistakes my father and stepmother made with me?" I held her close, stroking her auburn hair. "You're going to be wonderful. I can already see it, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way." She cried harder at that, clinging to me like a child. At the time, I thought they were tears of gratitude and relief. Now I wonder what was really going through her mind. November came, and everything still seemed perfect on the surface. But there were small things that nagged at me, details that didn't quite add up, but that I couldn't put my finger on. Like the fact that Celestina never seemed to have friends over to the house. When I asked about the bridesmaids from the wedding, she'd make vague comments about everyone being busy with their own lives. Or the way she would sometimes flinch when her phone rang, checking the caller ID with what looked like anxiety before deciding whether to answer. Once, when she'd left her phone on the kitchen counter and gone to use the bathroom, it rang. The caller ID showed blocked number. Something made me feel uneasy, though I couldn't explain why. When Celestina came back and saw the missed call, her face went pale. "Are you all right?" I asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," she said quickly, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Just some spam caller. They've been bothering me for weeks."
But I noticed she immediately took her phone into another room and stayed there for nearly 20 minutes. Another time, in early December, I stopped by unexpectedly because I was in Charlotte for a doctor's appointment. When Celestina answered the door, she looked genuinely startled to see me. "Beatrice, I wasn't expecting you." "I should have called," I apologized. "I had an appointment with a specialist at Presbyterian Hospital, and I thought I'd stop by on my way home. Is this a bad time?" "No, of course not," she said, stepping aside to let me in. But I noticed her glance nervously toward the stairs. We had a pleasant visit, but she seemed distracted, kept checking her watch, and seemed relieved when I said I needed to get back to Asheville before dark. These small inconsistencies bothered me, but I pushed them aside. Everyone had private moments, private concerns. Marriage wasn't a despot. Pregnancy brought its own stresses. I was probably just being an overprotective mother-in-law, seeing problems where none existed. December arrived, bringing the 6-month anniversary of the wedding. Nathaniel seemed happier than I'd ever seen him. He talked constantly about the baby, about their plans to convert one of the bedrooms into a nursery, about the life they were building together. Then, on a cold Tuesday morning, December 15th, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but it had a local Asheville area code. I almost didn't answer. I'd been getting a lot of spam calls lately, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Caldwell?" The woman's voice was professional but strained. "This is Josephine Reeves. I was the wedding planner for your son Nathaniel and Celestina's wedding." I remembered her, though we'd barely interacted after that initial planning meeting. She'd been efficient and professional throughout the wedding preparations, but Celestina had handled most of the direct communication with her. "Of course, Josephine. How are you? Is everything all right?" There was a long pause. In that silence, I felt my stomach begin to knot with an unnamed dread. "Mrs. Caldwell, I need to meet with you as soon as possible. There's something about Celestina you need to know. Something I discovered after the wedding that I've been struggling with for months. I can't keep quiet about it any longer." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean? What did you discover?" "I can't discuss this over the phone," Josephine said, her voice tight with stress. "Can you meet me at the Sunny Point Cafe on Haywood Road this afternoon? Say 2 o'clock? "Josephine, you're scaring me. What's this about?" Another pause. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Mrs. Caldwell, your son's wife isn't who she claims to be. Her name isn't Celestina Ashford. Her father isn't Preston Ashford. And everything she's told you about her past, all of it, is a carefully constructed lie." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself. "That's impossible," I heard myself say. "I've met her father. I've seen photographs from her childhood. I have proof. Documents, photographs, testimony from people who know the truth. Mrs. Caldwell, I'm not doing this to hurt you or your family. I'm doing this because your son is in danger. Financial danger, emotional danger, possibly even physical danger. This woman, whoever she really is, She's running some kind of long-term con, and she's pregnant with your son's child, which makes the situation even more complicated. I couldn't breathe. The kitchen was spinning around me. 2:00, I finally managed to say, "Sunny Point Cafe. I'll be there." I hung up and stood there in my kitchen, staring at nothing, my mind refusing to process what I'd just heard. It couldn't be true. It couldn't be. But somewhere deep in my gut, in that place where mothers know things they can't explain, I felt the terrible certainty that every word Josephine had said was true. My son's perfect wife, the woman I'd welcomed into my family and into my heart, was a fraud, and I had no idea how deep the deception went. The hours between Josephine's phone call and our scheduled meeting felt like an eternity. I paced my small house like a caged animal, my mind spinning with impossible thoughts. Every time I tried to convince myself that this was all some terrible misunderstanding, I remembered the certainty in Josephine's voice. She had proof, documents, testimony from people who know the truth. I looked at the framed photograph on my mantel, the one from Nathaniel and Celestina's wedding day. They looked so happy, so perfect in love. Celestina's amber eyes sparkled with joy as she gazed at my son. How could that be fake? How could someone maintain such an elaborate deception for over a year? But then I remembered all those small inconsistencies that had nagged at me. The way Celestina avoided visiting Savannah, her vagueness about childhood details, the nervous way she checked her phone, the blocked calls that made her face go pale. I'd dismissed all of it as normal quirks, as the natural privacy everyone deserves. Now those dismissed details felt like warning signs I'd been too blind to see. By 1:35, I couldn't stand waiting any longer. I grabbed my purse and coat and drove to Sunny Point Cafe, arriving 20 minutes early. The cafe was a local favorite, known for its farm-to-table breakfast and lunch menu. On any other day, I would have enjoyed the warm and welcoming atmosphere. Today, it felt like I was walking into an execution. I ordered coffee I knew I wouldn't drink and sat at a corner table where I could watch the door. My hands trembled as I wrapped them around the warm mug. What was I about to learn? And more importantly, how was I going to tell Nathaniel?
At exactly 2:00, Josephine Reeves walked through the door. She looked different than I remembered from the wedding planning meetings. Thinner, more tired, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. She wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of the professional attire I'd seen her in before. When she spotted me, her expression was a mixture of relief and dread. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Thank you for coming." "Tell me," I said, without preamble. My voice was steadier than I felt. "Tell me everything." Josephine pulled a large manila envelope from her bag and set it on the table between us. She didn't open it immediately. Instead, she looked at me with genuine sympathy. "Before I show you this, I need you to understand something. I've been agonizing over whether to come forward for months. I'm violating client confidentiality. I could lose my business over this. But I kept thinking, if it were my son, I'd want to know. I'd need to know." "Just tell me," I whispered. Josephine took a deep breath and opened the envelope. She pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table to me. It showed Celestina, or the woman I knew as Celestina, but she looked different. Her auburn hair was bleached platinum blonde. She wore heavy makeup and a tight red dress. She was standing outside what appeared to be a nightclub, laughing with two other women who were similarly dressed. But what made my heart stop was the man whose arm was around her waist. He was tall, heavily tattooed, and looked nothing like my son. "Who is this man?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "His name is Dante Volkov. He's a known con artist with connections to organized crime in Florida and Georgia. And the woman in this photo isn't Celestina Ashford. Her real name is Marissa Volkov. She's Dante's wife. The cafe seemed to spin around me. His wife? That's impossible. She's married to my son. She's married to both of them, she said quietly. Bigamy. But that's actually the least of the crimes she's committing. She pulled out more photographs. Each one showed Celestina with this Dante man at restaurants, on what looked like a yacht, entering and leaving expensive hotels. In some of the photos, her hair was blonde. In others, it was dark brown. In one, she was a redhead. But those amber eyes were unmistakable. "How did you get these?" I asked, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the photos. After the wedding, something didn't sit right with me. There were too many inconsistencies in the planning process. Celestina would sometimes forget details she told me earlier, change her story about her family, get confused about her own history. At first I thought it was just normal wedding stress, but then I started noticing other things. She pulled out a small notebook, flipping through pages of notes. She paid for everything in cash or with cashier's checks, never a credit card in her own name. When I needed to send documents to her father, she insisted I send them to her first, and she'd forward them. I never had direct contact with Preston Ashford except at the wedding itself. And when I tried to verify some of the vendor recommendations she claimed came from friends in Savannah, I couldn't find any record of those people existing. "So you investigated her?" I asked. "I hired a private investigator, a good one, former FBI. It took him 3 months, but he found her real identity, her real background, everything." She pulled out a thick document from the envelope and set it across to me. It was a private investigator report, over 50 pages long. Marissa Volkov, born Marissa Chen in Sacramento, California, 41 years old. She's been running romance and marriage scams for over 15 years. She targets successful, recently divorced men, often those who've been hurt in previous relationships and are vulnerable. She creates elaborate false identities, complete with false family members, false histories, everything. She marries them, gains access to their finances, and then either drains their accounts and disappears or sets them up for larger scams involving her husband and his criminal network. I couldn't breathe. 41? She told us she was 32. The man who played her father at the wedding, Preston Ashford, his real name is Marcus Tebow. He's an actor Dante hires for these cons. He's played Marissa's father at least 6 different weddings over the past decade. The coffee I'd been trying to drink threatened to come back up. 6 weddings? That's what we know. There could be more. The investigator found records of at least 5 previous marriages, all to wealthy men, all ending with the men financially ruined. One committed suicide after she disappeared with over $2 million. Tears were streaming down my face now. "Oh my God, Nathaniel! We have to tell Nathaniel." "There's more," she said gently. "And this is the part that made me know I had to contact you, no matter the consequences." She pulled out bank statements, financial documents that made my blood run cold. "Your son opened several joint accounts with Marissa shortly after they got married. She's been systematically moving money out of those accounts and into offshore accounts. So far, she's transferred over $180,000. But it's not just that. She showed me loan applications, credit card applications, all bearing Nathaniel's forged signature." "She's been taking out loans in your son's name. Credit cards, personal loans, even a second mortgage on their house. Nathaniel doesn't know any of this exists. By the investigator's calculation, she's put him nearly $400,000 in debt that he's not aware of." I actually gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. $400,000? And she's accelerating. The investigator believes she's getting ready to disappear. Usually, she stays for about a year to 18 months before vanishing. But there's something else that's different about this con. Josephine's face looked pained as she pulled out one final document. "The pregnancy isn't real, Mrs. Caldwell. Or at least, we don't think it is. The investigator managed to access medical records. I won't tell you how, it wasn't exactly legal. But there's no record of Marissa being pregnant. No doctor visits, no prenatal care, nothing. We think she's faking it as part of her exit strategy. Faking it? How can you fake a pregnancy? Fake belly, hormones to mimic symptoms, carefully timed updates about doctor appointments that no one else attends? It's been done before in these kinds of scams. The investigator found evidence that she did the same thing in at least 2 previous cons. She uses the pregnancy to extract more money for baby expenses, then claims to have a miscarriage right before she disappears. It makes the men less likely to immediately suspect theft. They're too devastated by the supposed loss of the baby. I felt physically ill. This couldn't be happening. Not to my Nathaniel, not to my kind, trusting, wonderful son who'd already had his heart broken once. Why? I finally managed to ask. Why target Nathaniel? There are wealthier men out there. Josephine nodded. The investigator believes it's because of you, actually. Me? You own your home outright, no mortgage. You have a pension from your late husband's military service, some investments, probably around $300,000 to $400,000 in total assets. Not wealthy, but comfortable. Marissa's pattern is to target men who have access to family money. After she drains the husband, she usually makes a play for the parents' assets too. The investigator found evidence that in at least 2 previous scams, she convinced elderly parents to give her power of attorney or to change their wills. One woman lost her entire life savings before realizing what happened. The full horror of it crashed over me like a wave. Celestina, Marissa, had been grooming me. All those afternoons together, all the conversations about how I was like a mother to her, all the emotional bonding, it had all been set up. She wasn't building a relationship with me out of love. She was setting me up to be her next victim. The private investigator is still following her, Josephine continued. He's documented meetings with Dante Volkov at least once a week. They meet at a storage facility outside Charlotte. The investigator believes that's where they're keeping items they've already stolen from your son. Valuable artwork, jewelry, anything they can easily liquidate when they run. She pulled out surveillance photos showing Celestina, I couldn't think of her as Marissa yet, meeting with the tattooed man at a dingy storage facility. They were embracing, laughing. In one photo, they were kissing, while she was pregnant with my son's child. Except she wasn't pregnant. None of it was real. I have to tell Nathaniel, I said, standing up so quickly I nearly knocked over my chair. I have to tell him right now. Josephine grabbed my arm gently. Mrs. Caldwell, please sit down. We need to talk about how to handle this carefully. Carefully? She's robbing my son blind. She's destroying his life. I know, and we're going to stop her. But if we confront her directly without a plan, she'll disappear. All this evidence, all this proof, it won't matter if she's gone. Your son will still be left with all that debt, all those forged loans, and no way to prove it wasn't his fault. We need to involve the police, the FBI even. This is organized crime, wire fraud, identity theft, by gimme, federal crimes. But we need to be strategic. I sank back into my chair, my whole body shaking. What do I do? How do I look at my son and not tell him his wife is a con artist? How do I sit across from that woman at dinner and not... I couldn't finish the sentence. The rage building inside me was unlike anything I had ever felt. The investigator wants to meet with you, Josephine said. He has a plan, but it requires you to act normal for a little while longer, to not tip Marissa off that we know who she is. Can you do that? Could I? Could I pretend everything was fine while this monster destroyed my son's life? I thought about Nathaniel's face when he'd told me he was proposing, the joy in his voice when he'd announced the pregnancy, the way he looked at Celestina like she had hung the moon. I can do whatever I need to do to protect my son, I said, my voice hard with determination. When can I meet this investigator? Tomorrow, 10 a.m. my office. His name is Raymond Torres. He's former FBI, specialized in organized fraud cases. He'll explain exactly what needs to happen next. I nodded, trying to process everything. Then a thought struck me. Josephine, why did you do this? You said yourself you could lose your business. Why risk everything to investigate a client? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. 5 years ago, my sister married a man she met online. Charming, successful, said all the right things. 6 months after the wedding, he emptied her bank accounts and disappeared. Turned out he was part of a romance scam operation. My sister lost everything. Her savings, her house, her faith in people. She tried to kill herself.
Josephine's eyes were wet with tears. She survived, thankfully, but she's never been the same. When I started noticing the inconsistencies with Celestina, when things didn't add up, I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't let another family go through what my sister went through. So yes, I'm risking my business, but it's worth it if we can stop these people. I reached across the table and took her hand. Thank you. Thank you for caring enough to risk everything. We sat there for a moment. Two women bound together by the need to protect people we loved from predators who wore human faces. Finally, Josephine gathered all the documents and photos back into the envelope. Take this with you. Study it tonight. Tomorrow Raymond will explain the plan. But Mrs. Caldwell, Beatrice, you need to prepare yourself. The next few weeks are going to be incredibly difficult. You're going to have to lie to your son. You're going to have to smile at Marissa and act like nothing's wrong. You're going to have to be stronger than you've ever been in your life. I buried my husband, I said quietly. I raised 2 children mostly on my own. I survived cancer 3 years ago. I've been strong before. I can be strong again. But as I drove home with the envelope on my passenger seat, I wasn't sure if that was true. How did you prepare yourself to tell your son that everything he believed about his life was a lie? That the woman he loved didn't exist? That the baby he was excited about wasn't real? That night, I barely slept. I kept the envelope on my kitchen table, unable to look at it, but unable to put it away. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Celestina. Hi, Beatrice. I was thinking about you and couldn't sleep. The baby was doing somersaults. Made me think about how lucky I am to have you in my life. Can't wait for you to meet your grandchild. Love you. I stared at that message for a long time. The casual cruelty of it. The calculated manipulation. She was texting me at 3 a.m. about a baby that didn't exist, continuing the con even in the middle of the night. I typed and deleted a dozen responses. Finally, I just wrote, "Love you too, sweetheart. Get some rest." It physically hurt to send those words. The next morning, I drove to Josephine's office with a sense of grim determination. I'd spent the night reading through the investigator's report, studying every detail of Marissa's past crimes, understanding the pattern of her cons. She was good, frighteningly good. She knew exactly how to read people, how to become whoever they needed her to be. For each husband, she'd crafted a different persona. For one, she'd been a struggling artist who needed rescuing. For another, a successful businesswoman who appreciated his ambition. For Nathaniel, she'd been the wounded soul who needed his kindness and stability. And for me, she'd been the daughter I never had. The office building was modest, tucked into a quiet street in downtown Asheville. Josephine met me at the door and led me upstairs to a small conference room where a man was already waiting. Raymond Torres was in his mid-50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to assess everything at once. He had the bearing of someone who'd spent years dealing with criminals and had learned to see through deception. When he shook my hand, his grip was firm and confident. "Mrs. Caldwell, thank you for meeting with me. I know this must be incredibly difficult. Mr. Torres, Josephine told me you have a plan. Tell me what I need to do." He appreciated the directness. He opened his laptop and pulled up a presentation. First, you need to understand who we're dealing with. Marissa Volkov is part of a sophisticated criminal organization run by her husband, Dante Volkov. They specialize in long-term romance fraud, but they've recently expanded into identity theft, money laundering, and even human trafficking.
Marissa is the front person. She's charming, convincing, and has no criminal record because she's never been caught. He showed me photos of Dante, mugshots from various arrests for assault, fraud, and racketeering. None of the charges had stuck. He had expensive lawyers and knew how to work the system. Dante manages multiple women who run these scams. Marissa is his wife and his top earner, but she's not the only one. We've identified at least 4 other women working similar cons across the Southeast right now. The scale of it was staggering. This wasn't just about my son. This was an entire criminal enterprise destroying families. Our goal is to catch them in the act and build a case strong enough that the FBI will take it seriously. That means we need to let the con play out a little longer while we gather evidence. Absolutely not, I said immediately. Every day this goes on, she's stealing more from my son. Every day he's falling deeper in love with a lie. I understand, Raymond said calmly, but if we confront her now, she disappears. Your son is left with all that debt and no way to prove he didn't take out those loans himself. The credit card companies and banks will come after him. His credit will be destroyed. He could face criminal charges for fraud if we can't prove he wasn't involved. That stopped me cold. They'd accuse Nathaniel of being part of this? It's happened before in these cases. The husband claims he didn't know about the fraudulent accounts, but without proof, it becomes he said, she said. And she'll be gone, untraceable. We need evidence that shows clearly that she forged his signatures, that she acted without his knowledge, that she's part of a larger criminal conspiracy. How long? I asked. How long do I have to let this continue?
2 weeks, maybe 3. We're working with the FBI now. They're very interested in Dante Volkov. They've been trying to build a case against his organization for years, but they've never been able to get close. Marissa could be the key, but we need to catch her actually moving the money, catch her meeting with Dante to transfer stolen goods, catch her in obvious criminal acts that can't be explained away. And what do you need from me? Raymond pulled out a small device, about the size of a button. This is a recording device, state-of-the-art, completely undetectable. We need you to wear it during your interactions with Marissa. We need her to talk about the money, about Nathaniel, ideally about Dante. Women like her, they get comfortable with their marks. They start to slip, to say things they shouldn't. If you can get her talking, we can use those recordings as evidence. He showed me how it worked, how it clipped to my clothing, and recorded everything within a 20-foot radius. We also need you to do something harder, he continued. We need you to offer to help her financially. Tell her you want to give money for the baby or help with the new house, whatever makes sense. We need to document her accepting money from you while we can prove she's simultaneously stealing from your son. It establishes a pattern of deliberate financial exploitation. You want me to give her money? The thought made me sick. Not real money, we'll set up a sting. But yes, we need to establish that she's actively targeting you as her next victim. Right now, we can prove what she's done to your son, but we want to build the strongest possible case. If we can show she's targeting you too, it demonstrates predatory intent and makes the case much stronger. I sat back in my chair trying to process all of this. I had to spend more time with this woman, smile at her, pretend to care about her, all while wearing a wire and trying to trap her into confessing. There's one more thing, Raymond said gently. At some point, probably soon, she's going to claim to have a miscarriage. That's usually her exit strategy. Create sympathy, extract final payments for medical bills or emotional recovery, then disappear while everyone's too devastated to think clearly. When that happens, we need to be ready to move immediately. What happens when you arrest her? What happens to Nathaniel? That's the hardest part, Raymond admitted. Your son is going to be devastated. He's going to feel betrayed, humiliated, angry. He might even blame you for investigating her, for not telling him sooner. You need to be prepared for that. I thought about my son's face, about how he'd looked at Celestino with such love and trust. He'll hate me, I said quietly. Maybe at first, Josephine said, speaking for the first time, but eventually he'll understand you were protecting him. He'll see that you saved him from losing everything. Will I, though? I looked at Raymond.
Save him, I mean, or is the damage already done? Raymond was honest. The financial damage is significant. It'll take years to clean up his credit, to pay off the fraudulent debts. Emotionally, that's harder to predict. Some victims of these scams recover quickly. Others struggle for years with trust issues, depression, even PTSD. Your son will need therapy, support, time. But yes, if we do this right, we can save him from even worse damage. Without intervention, Marissa would have continued to drain him for several more months, potentially leaving him bankrupt and homeless. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. Normal people going about their normal lives, with no idea that monsters walked among them wearing beautiful faces. Give me the wire, I said finally, turning back to Raymond. Tell me exactly what I need to do. For the next hour, Raymond coached me on how to wear the device, how to steer conversations to get useful information, and how to stay calm even when I wanted to scream. He gave me a burner phone that I was to use only to contact him, never from my home or anywhere Marissa might overhear. One last thing, he said as I was preparing to leave. Don't tell your son. I know that goes against every instinct you have as a mother, but if he knows, his behavior will change. Marissa will notice. These con artists, they're hyper-aware of shifts in behavior, changes in routine. If Nathaniel starts acting differently toward her, she'll know something's wrong and she'll run. So I lie to my son to catch the woman who's lying to him? You protect your son by doing something incredibly hard, Raymond corrected gently. You carry this burden alone so that he doesn't have to carry a heavier one later. I left that office feeling like I was carrying the weight of the world. As I drove home, my phone rang. It was Nathaniel. Hey, Mom, I was just calling to check in. Celestina and I were hoping you could come up for dinner this weekend. She wants to start looking at baby furniture, and she really wants your input. I closed my eyes, gripping the steering wheel. The wire device was in my purse. The evidence of his wife's betrayal was in the envelope on my passenger seat. And he wanted me to come look at baby furniture. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. I'd love to come. Great! Celestina will be so happy. She was just saying this morning how grateful she is to have you in her life, how lucky she feels that I have such an amazing mom. Every word was a knife to my heart. I'm lucky too, I managed. Lucky to have both of you. I'll see you Saturday. After I hung up, I had to pull over because my hands were shaking too badly to drive. I sat in a random parking lot and cried. For my son, for the grandmother I thought I'd be, for the daughter-in-law who'd never existed, and for the terrible thing I was about to do. But when the tears stopped, I dried my face, started my car, and drove home. I had work to do. I had a monster to catch. And I'd be damned if I'd let Marissa Volkoff destroy my family without a fight. The war had begun, and she had no idea she just made an enemy of a mother protecting her child. Saturday morning arrived too quickly. I'd spent the past 3 days practicing with the recording device Raymond had given me, getting used to the weight of it clipped to my bra, learning to ignore its presence. I'd rehearsed conversations in my mirror, trying to figure out how to naturally steer discussions toward money and Marissa's past without seeming suspicious. But no amount of practice could prepare me for what I was about to do. I stood in my bedroom at 8 a.m., staring at my reflection. The recording device was invisible beneath my burgundy sweater, but I could feel it there, like a brand against my skin, a constant reminder that I was about to become a spy in my own family. My phone buzzed with a text from Raymond. Remember, stay natural, let her do most of the talking. If she mentions money, family finances, or Dante, try to keep the conversation going. You've got this. I didn't feel like I had this. I felt like I was going to throw up. Another text came through, this one from Celestina. Can't wait to see you today. I found the most adorable crib online. Also, making your favorite lunch, chicken salad sandwiches with those cranberries you love. Drive safe. Heart. The heart emoji made my stomach turn. Every sweet gesture, every kind word, every affectionate text, all of it was calculated manipulation. How did someone become this hollow, this cruel? I forced myself to respond. Looking forward to it, sweetheart. Leaving soon. The 2-hour drive to Charlotte felt like both an eternity and no time at all. I kept the radio off, needing the silence to prepare myself mentally. Raymond had coached me extensively on what to listen for, what questions to ask, how to respond if Marissa said something incriminating. The key is to seem sympathetic and helpful, he'd told me. These con artists, they're always looking for their next angle. If you present yourself as someone with resources who's eager to help, she'll start testing the waters. She might mention financial difficulties or investment opportunities or needing help with unexpected expenses. That's when you lean in. As I merged onto I-77 north toward Charlotte, my hands were sweating on the steering wheel. I'd worn a wire once before, in my life, 30 years ago, when I'd helped police catch the man who'd been breaking into homes in our neighborhood. But that had been different. That had been a stranger, a clear criminal. This was the woman who'd cried in my arms, who'd told me I was like a mother to her, who'd shared what I'd believed were her deepest vulnerabilities. Except none of it had been real. I arrived at Nathaniel and Marissa's house in Myers Park at exactly 11 a.m. The neighborhood looked even more beautiful in the winter sunlight, with historic homes decorated with tasteful Christmas lights and wreaths. Their colonial revival stood proudly on the corner, its white columns gleaming. A house purchased with stolen money. A life built on lies. Before I could even get out of my car, the front door flew open and Marissa emerged, wearing a flowing maternity dress in soft pink. Her belly looked convincingly round beneath the fabric. She'd either gotten very good at the fake pregnancy prosthetic or, and this thought chilled me, she'd done this so many times she'd perfected it. "Beatrice!" she called out, waving enthusiastically. "You made it!" I forced my brightest smile and climbed out of the car. She met me halfway up the walk and pulled me into a warm hug. I had to fight every instinct not to pull away, not to scream at her, not to tear off that fake belly and throw it in her face. Instead, I hugged her back. "Hi, sweetheart. You look wonderful. That color is beautiful on you." "Thank you. I'm definitely in the glowing phase now. The baby's been so active lately. I swear, I think we're gonna have a soccer player." "Is Nathaniel inside?" "Actually, no. There was an emergency at work. Some project deadline got moved up. He felt terrible about it, but I told him we'd be fine. It'll give us some girl time." Her smile was warm and genuine looking. I hope that's okay." It was more than okay. It was perfect. Raymond had told me the best confessions came when Marissa thought she was alone with the mark, when there were no witnesses to what she said. "That sounds lovely," I said, following her into the house. The interior was even more beautifully decorated than the last time I'd visited. New furniture filled the living room, expensive pieces that probably cost more than my car. Artwork I didn't recognize hung on the walls. Through the dining room doorway, I could see a crystal chandelier that definitely hadn't been there a month ago. All purchased with my son's money. Or rather, with money stolen in my son's name. "Your home looks stunning," I said, and meant it. Marissa had excellent taste, I'd give her that. "Did you redecorate?" "Just a few pieces here and there," she said breezily, leading me toward the kitchen. "Preston, my father, sent us an early Christmas gift. He's been so generous lately. I think having a grandchild on the way has made him nostalgic." Preston. The actor named Marcus Tebow who played her father at the wedding. I wondered if he got a cut of the profits or just a flat fee for his performance.
The kitchen smelled amazing. Fresh bread, chicken salad, and something baking that smelled like cinnamon. Marissa had clearly been cooking all morning. Another calculated move, I realized. Show the mother-in-law what a perfect homemaker she is. "Sit, sit," Marissa insisted, gesturing to the breakfast nook with its view of the backyard. "I made fresh lemonade. Is that okay? I know you don't like it too sweet." She'd remembered. Of course she had. Remembering details, making people feel seen and valued, that was part of her toolkit. As she poured our drinks, I noticed her phone sitting on the counter.
It buzzed with a notification, and I caught a glimpse of the screen. The contact name read DV, Dante Volkov. My heart rate quickened, but I forced my face to remain neutral. Raymond's voice echoed in my head. Stay calm, stay natural. You're just a mother-in-law visiting her daughter-in-law. Marissa quickly flipped the phone over and brought me my lemonade, settling across from me at the table. So, she said, her amber eyes bright with what looked like genuine excitement. I wanted to show you the cribs I've been looking at. I'm torn between two different styles. She pulled out her iPad and opened a tab showing expensive baby furniture. For the next 20 minutes, we discussed cribs, changing tables, and nursery themes. She was convincing, asking my opinion, taking notes on what I suggested, sharing stories about how excited Nathaniel was about becoming a father. Stories about a baby that didn't exist. I played my part, offering advice based on my experience with Nathaniel and Claire, suggesting practical choices mixed with sentimental touches. All the while, the recording device captured every word. Finally, as we moved on to lunch, I saw my opening. This is all so expensive, I said, carefully keeping my tone light and conversational as she set down plates of beautifully arranged chicken salad sandwiches. Babies certainly cost more than they used to. When I had Nathaniel, a crib cost $50. Now they're $500. Marissa laughed, but something flickered in her eyes. Interest. I know, it's ridiculous, and that's just the furniture. Don't even get me started on the medical costs. Even with Nathaniel's insurance, we're looking at thousands out of pocket. Really? His insurance doesn't cover most of it? There's a high deductible, she said, taking a bite of her sandwich. We've already paid almost $10,000, and we'll probably end up paying another $15,000 before the baby arrives. It's stressful, honestly. It was a lie. I'd seen the financial records. There were no medical payments because there were no medical appointments. But this was exactly what Raymond had predicted. She was testing the waters, seeing if I'd bite. That's terrible, I said, sympathetically. If you need help, Marissa, you know I'd be happy to contribute. You're family. Her eyes lit up just for a second before she arranged her face into grateful surprise. Oh, Beatrice, I couldn't ask you to do that. You've already been so generous with your time and support. You're not asking, I'm offering. Thomas left me comfortable, and I've been saving for grandchildren anyway. I'd love to help with medical expenses or baby furniture or whatever you need. I watched her internal calculation, the gears turning behind those amber eyes. How much could she get? How quickly? What story would work best? That's incredibly kind, she said, slowly. Honestly, with the house expenses and everything, it would take some pressure off. Nathaniel works so hard, but starting a family is expensive. If you really meant it, maybe help with the medical bills. I have receipts for everything we've paid so far. Of course, I said, my heart pounding. Fake receipts for fake medical expenses. Raymond had predicted this too. She probably had a whole folder prepared. You're such a blessing, Marissa, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her touch made my skin crawl, but I squeezed back. I feel the same way about you, sweetheart. I lied, the words tasting like poison. You've brought so much joy into Nathaniel's life, into all our lives. Her phone buzzed again on the counter. She glanced at it, and I saw her jaw tighten slightly. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Oh, yes, just... She hesitated, and I could see her making a decision. Actually, it's a little stressful. There's been some confusion with our bank accounts, some transfers that Nathaniel had made that I wasn't aware of. I'm sure it's nothing, just need to straighten it out with the bank. My pulse quickened. Was she really going to talk about the stolen money? That sounds frustrating, I said sympathetically. Banking errors can be such a headache. Is it a lot of money? A few $1,000s. Nathaniel's been moving money around for some investment opportunities, which is great. But he sometimes forgets to tell me. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Communication, right? The cornerstone of marriage. She was laying groundwork, I realized. If the fraud was discovered, she could claim Nathaniel had been making investments she didn't know about. She was already building her exit narrative, creating a reasonable doubt. Well, I'm sure you two will figure it out. Nathaniel's always been responsible with money. Thomas and I raised him to be careful about finances. He is very responsible. That's why I'm sure it's just a communication issue. Her phone buzzed a third time. This time, she picked it up and glanced at the screen. I saw her face go pale. I'm so sorry, Beatrice. I need to make a quick phone call. It's about a doctor's appointment I need to reschedule. Do you mind? Of course not, honey. Take your time.
She stood up and walked toward the back of the house, but she didn't go far enough. I could still hear her voice drifting from the hallway, and I knew the recording device would pick it up even better. I can't talk right now, she said in a low, tense voice. She's here. No, I told you, Saturday afternoon. That's too risky. Look, I'm handling it, okay? Just give me another 2 weeks. The medical bills story is working. She already offered money. I know what I'm doing. There was a long pause. Don't you dare threaten me. I've gotten us almost $500,000 from this job, and I'll get more. But you need to be patient. Fine. Monday night. The usual place. But you need to stop calling me when... Her voice suddenly cut off, and I heard footsteps coming back toward the kitchen. I quickly took a bite of my sandwich, trying to look completely absorbed in my lunch. Marissa reappeared, her face composed but her eyes slightly wild. Sorry about that, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Where were we? I was just thinking about how beautiful your Christmas decorations are going to look. Do you and Nathaniel have any special traditions? For the next hour, we talked about holidays, about baby names, about her plans for a nursery. She showed me paint swatches and fabric samples. She told me stories about Nathaniel at work, about their plans for the future, about how happy they were. Every word was alive, wrapped in silk. Around 2 p.m., she suggested we go look at actual baby stores in nearby South Park Mall. I agreed, and we drove there in her car, a new BMW SUV that I now knew was purchased with stolen money or fraudulent loans. At the baby store, Marissa played the role of excited first-time mother perfectly. She cooed over tiny clothes, tested strollers, and asked staff members endless questions about car seats and bottle warmers. Other shoppers smiled at us, probably thinking we were a mother and daughter preparing for a grandchild. If only they knew. At one point, while Marissa was distracted by a sales associate, I quickly texted Raymond from my burner phone. Got conversation about money, also overheard phone call with DV, says usual place, Monday night, $500,000 mentioned. His response was immediate. Perfect. Keep going. We'll have surveillance Monday. When Marissa returned, she was holding an adorable stuffed elephant. What do you think? For the nursery? It's perfect. And I watched as she added it to a growing pile of items she was planning to purchase. Items for a baby that would never exist. As she checked out using a credit card I now knew was probably fraudulent, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. Thank you for being here for this, Beatrice. I wish my mother could have been here to help me prepare, but having you, it means everything. I hugged her, this professional liar, this predator in expensive maternity clothes, and I let her cry on my shoulder while other shoppers looked on sympathetically. I'll always be here for you, Beatrice, and I felt the recording device capture every word of my lie. We returned to her house around 4 p.m. and Nathaniel still wasn't home. Marissa seemed increasingly agitated, checking her phone constantly. Is everything all right? You seem worried. I'm fine, she said quickly. Just tired. The baby's been draining my energy lately. Why don't you rest? I can clean up from lunch. Oh, Beatrice, I couldn't ask you to do that. You're not asking. Go lie down, I'll tidy up and then head home. You need to take care of yourself and that baby. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Doubt? Or was I just seeing what I wanted to see? "You're the best," she finally said. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." After she went upstairs, I quickly moved through the kitchen, cleaning dishes but also carefully observing. I opened the drawer where she kept papers and saw stacks of receipts, bank statements, and documents. I took photos of everything with my burner phone, being careful to arrange things exactly as I'd found them. In a folder labeled Medical, I found the fake receipt she'd mentioned. They were good forgeries. Letterhead from a legitimate OBGYN practice, detailed lists of services, payment confirmations. If I hadn't known the truth, I would never have questioned them. I photographed everything and sent it to Raymond. As I was finishing up, I heard a noise from upstairs, not Marissa moving around, but her voice again, talking to someone on the phone. I crept closer to the stairs, staying in the hallway where the recording device would pick up her words. "I know it's moving faster than planned, but she's offering money and Nathaniel's accounts are almost tapped. Another month, maybe 6 weeks? Yes, I'll stage the miscarriage after Christmas. The mother will probably give us $20,000 or $30,000 for medical bills before then. No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's completely clueless." Each word was like a knife to my heart. My son, described as completely clueless by the woman he loved. "I'll bring the documents Monday. Everything that needs his signature. We'll do the house refinance next week. That should get us another $100,000. Stop worrying. I've done this 6 times. I know what I'm doing." I heard her moving and I quickly retreated to the kitchen, making noise with the dishes to cover my presence. When she came back downstairs a few minutes later, her face was freshly washed and she'd changed into more comfortable clothes. "Feeling better?" "Much. Thank you for cleaning up. You didn't have to do that." "My pleasure, sweetheart. I should probably get going, though. It's a long drive back to Asheville."
Of course. Thank you so much for coming, for looking at baby things with me, for her voice caught with what seemed like genuine emotion. For everything, Beatrice. You've made me feel like I finally have a real mother. I pulled her into a hug, and this time I let myself feel the full force of my rage and grief. This woman had stolen from my son. She was planning to fake a miscarriage. She was about to refinance their house without his knowledge. And she was using the loneliness of a motherless child as part of her manipulation. "Drive safe," she said as I got into my car. "Text me when you get home so I know you made it okay." "I will, sweetheart. Take care of that baby." I watched her wave from the doorway, her hand resting on her fake pregnant belly, the picture of a happy, expectant mother. As soon as I was out of sight of the house, I had to pull over. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't drive. I sat in a random parking lot and called Raymond on the burner phone. "I got everything," I said, my voice breaking. She talked about the money, about faking the miscarriage, about refinancing the house. She's planning to leave in 6 weeks. And Raymond, she's done this 6 times. 6 families destroyed. You did incredible work today, Beatrice. This recording is exactly what we needed. Combined with the surveillance on Monday when she meets Dante, we'll have enough to move forward. Can't we arrest her now? Can't we stop this today? Not yet. We need to catch her with Dante, need to document the transfer of stolen goods or money. If we move too soon, he disappears and she takes the fall alone. We need them both. She's planning to refinance my son's house next week. She could take out hundreds of thousands more. We'll stop her before that happens, I promise. But we need Monday's meeting first. Can you hold on for 4 more days? 4 more days of watching Marissa manipulate my son. 4 more days of lying to Nathaniel. 4 more days of playing along with this nightmare. I can do 4 more days, I said. But Raymond, when this is over, when she's arrested, how do I tell my son? How do I explain that I knew and didn't tell him? You tell him the truth, Raymond said gently, that you loved him enough to do the hardest thing a mother can do, protect him even when he didn't know he needed protecting. I drove home in a daze. When I finally walked into my house 3 hours later, I felt like I'd aged 10 years in one day. I carefully removed the recording device and placed it in the secure box Raymond had given me. My phone buzzed. A text from Marissa. "Thank you again for today. You made me so happy. Can't wait for you to meet your grandchild. Love you so much." And then, right below it, a text from Nathaniel. "Thanks, Mom, for spending time with Celestina today. She called me in tears, saying how grateful she is to have you in her life. I'm so glad you two are close. Love you." I sat on my couch and cried. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very center of my being. I cried for my son's innocence. I cried for the grandmother I thought I'd become. I cried for the daughter-in-law who'd never existed. And I cried for the terrible knowledge I carried alone. But when the tears finally stopped, I dried my face and I steeled my resolve. 4 more days. I could do this for 4 more days. Because on the other side of those 4 days was justice. On the other side was the truth. On the other side was the chance to save my son from complete destruction. Marissa Volkov had made one crucial mistake. She targeted a family with a mother who would fight back. And she was about to learn that a mother protecting her child was the most dangerous enemy she could have made. Monday couldn't come fast enough. Monday arrived with leaden skies that perfectly matched my mood. I'd barely slept over the weekend, running through every possible scenario in my mind. Tonight, Raymond's team would be surveilling Marissa's meeting with Dante Volkov at the storage facility. Tonight, we'd gather the final evidence needed to bring them both down. And then I'd have to tell Nathaniel that his entire marriage was a lie. Raymond called me at 9 a.m. with final instructions. "We have a team in place near the storage facility. Based on the phone intercepts, Marissa's meeting Dante at 8 p.m. We'll have video, audio, everything we need. But Beatrice, I need you to do one more thing." My stomach clenched. "What?" "Call Nathaniel. Ask him to come to your house tomorrow night for dinner. Tell him you need to discuss something important about the family. Don't tell him what. We'll make the arrests tonight, and tomorrow you'll explain everything to him with me and an FBI agent present. He'll need support, and he'll need answers. Better he hears it from you first." "He's going to hate me," I whispered. "He's going to be devastated, but he won't hate you. Give him time." After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone for 20 minutes before I could bring myself to call my son. "Hey, Mom," Nathaniel's voice was cheerful, completely unaware that his world was about to shatter. "What's up?" "Hi, sweetheart. I was wondering if you could come to Asheville tomorrow night for dinner, just you. I need to talk to you about something. Family business. Can you come around 6 o'clock? Is everything okay? Are you sick?" No, nothing like that. There's something we need to discuss. Family business. Can you come around 6 o'clock? "Sure, Mom. You're worrying me a little, but I'll be there." I love you, Nathaniel, more than anything in this world. "I love you too, Mom. See you tomorrow." The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. I cleaned my house 3 times, reorganized my kitchen cabinets, did anything to keep my mind occupied. Raymond sent me periodic updates via the burner phone. 3 p.m. Team in position. Target vehicle spotted entering storage facility area. 5 p.m. Second vehicle arrived. Male matching Dante Volkov description. Setting up close-range surveillance. 7:30 p.m., both targets on site. Recording equipment active. At 8:15 p.m., my phone rang. It was Raymond. "We got them," he said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Everything. Marissa handed Dante a laptop with all of Nathaniel's financial information, passwords, account numbers. They discussed 3 other active marks in detail. They counted out cash, over $60,000 that Marissa said came from various credit cards taken out in your son's name. And Beatrice, the storage unit is full of stolen items from multiple victims. Artwork, jewelry, electronics, everything. We have them cold. What happens now? FBI is moving in for arrests within the hour. Marissa will be taken into custody at the storage facility. Dante won't see it coming. By midnight, they'll both be in federal custody facing charges of wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, bigamy, and organized racketeering. These are serious federal crimes. They're looking at 20 years minimum, probably more. I sank into my chair, the weight of months of stress suddenly crashing down on me. It's really over? The investigation is over, but Beatrice, the hard part starts now. Your son is about to learn that his wife is a criminal, that their marriage is invalid, that the baby isn't real, and that he's hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. He's going to need you more than ever. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept my phone nearby, and at 11:47 p.m., I received a text from Raymond. Both in custody, clean arrests. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., my office. FBI agent Sarah Chen will be there to explain everything to Nathaniel. Be strong. Tuesday dragged on even worse than Monday. I prepared Nathaniel's favorite meal, roast pot with vegetables, the same dinner I'd made the night he told me about meeting Celestina. It felt like a lifetime ago. At 5:30 p.m., there was a knock at my door. Raymond and a professional-looking Asian woman in her 40s stood on my porch. Beatrice, this is FBI agent Sarah Chen. She's been leading the investigation into the Volkov organization. Agent Chen shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Caldwell, I want you to know that what you did took incredible courage. The evidence you gathered was instrumental in bringing down a criminal enterprise that's been operating for over a decade. You've saved countless future victims. I just want my son to be okay, I said. He will be, eventually, but tonight is going to be very difficult. We had just finished setting up in my living room when Nathaniel's car pulled into the driveway. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. He walked in with his usual smile, but it faded when he saw Raymond and Agent Chen. Mom, what's going on? Who are these people? Nathaniel, please sit down, I said, my voice shaking. These are Raymond Torres, a private investigator, and FBI agent Sarah Chen. There's something you need to know about Celestina. The confusion on his face slowly morphed into fear. What about her? Where is she? Is she okay? Is the baby? Your wife was arrested last night. Her real name is Marissa Volkov, and she's part of an organized criminal syndicate specializing in romance fraud and identity theft. Nathaniel stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. What? No, that's insane. Celestina isn't... She's not a criminal. She's my wife. She's pregnant with our baby. She's not pregnant, Raymond said quietly. I'm so sorry. I watched my son's face crumble, watched the color drain from his skin as he processed words that made no sense to him. Mom, he turned to me, his eyes pleading. Tell them they're wrong. Tell them this is a mistake. This was the moment I'd been dreading. Sweetheart, I've known for a week. The wedding planner discovered who she really was and contacted me. I've been working with Raymond and the FBI to gather evidence. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. The betrayal in his eyes cut deeper than any knife. You knew? For a week? You knew my wife was a criminal and you didn't tell me? We needed evidence, Agent Chen explained. If we'd confronted her without sufficient proof, she would have disappeared, and you'd be left with all the debt she incurred in your name with no way to prove you weren't complicit. Debt? What debt? For the next hour, Agent Chen walked Nathaniel through everything. The fake identity, the 6 previous marriages, the $180,000 she stole directly from his accounts, the $400,000 in fraudulent loans and credit cards taken out in his name, the storage unit full of stolen goods from multiple victims, artwork, jewelry, electronics, everything. With each revelation, I watched my son break a little more. He sat motionless, his face blank with shock, occasionally asking questions in a voice that didn't sound like his own. "The baby isn't real?" he asked again, as if he couldn't quite grasp it. "There is no baby," Raymond confirmed gently. "She's used the fake pregnancy tactic in at least 3 previous cons. It's part of how she extracts final payments before disappearing." And her father, Preston, an actor named Marcus Thiebaud. He's been arrested as well. Nathaniel put his head in his hands. Everything was a lie. "I'm afraid so," Agent Chen said. "Every detail of her identity was fabricated. Her name, her background, her family, even the nonprofit she claimed to work for, none of it was real. She's a professional con artist who's been doing this for 15 years. But she loved me," Nathaniel said, his voice breaking. "I know she did. You can't fake that kind of—" "She's a sociopath," Raymond interrupted. "She doesn't feel love the way normal people do. To her, you were a job. A very lucrative job."
Nathaniel stood up abruptly and walked to my front window, staring out at nothing. "I want to see her. I need to talk to her." "That's not possible right now," Agent Chan said. "She's in federal custody, awaiting arraignment. And Mr. Caldwell, I need to be honest with you. She's already trying to claim you were involved. She's telling investigators that you knew about the fraud, that you helped her plan it. It's a common defense strategy." Nathaniel whirled around. "What? She's trying to blame me?" "She's trying to save herself, which is why the evidence your mother gathered is so crucial. The recordings prove that you had no knowledge of her activities. Without that evidence, this situation would be very different for you." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the moment understanding dawned. "You saved me?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I couldn't tell you. I wanted to every single second, but if I had, she would have run, and I'd be facing criminal charges right now." He crossed the room and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I doubted you, even for a second." We stood there holding each other while he cried, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. Agent Chan and Raymond quietly excused themselves to my kitchen to give us privacy. "I loved her," Nathaniel said when he could finally speak. "God help me. I loved her so much. How could I be so stupid?" "You weren't stupid. You were human. You trusted someone who presented herself as trustworthy. You're the victim here, sweetheart. Never forget that." "But I should have seen. There must have been signs." "She's done this successfully to 6 other men. Successful, intelligent men. This is what she does. She's a professional predator." Over the next several hours, Agent Chan explained the legal process ahead. The FBI had frozen all the fraudulent accounts. They'd work with Nathaniel to separate legitimate debts from fraudulent ones. It would take months, possibly years, to fully clean up his credit and finances, but the federal government would support his case. Marissa and Dante were being charged under federal racketeering laws. The evidence was overwhelming. They were facing minimum sentences of 20 years each. The other women in their network were being rounded up. Multiple victims from previous scams were being contacted. "What happens to the house?" Nathaniel asked. "The one we bought in Myers Park." "Much of the down payment came from fraudulent funds," Agent Chan explained. "We'll work with the mortgage company, but you'll likely need to sell it. I'm sorry." "I don't want it anyway," Nathaniel said flatly. "Every inch of that place is contaminated with her lies." It was nearly midnight when Agent Chan and Raymond finally left.
Nathaniel had decided to stay at my house for the night. He couldn't bear the thought of going back to the home he'd shared with Marissa. We sat together on my couch, drinking tea in silence. Finally, Nathaniel spoke. The weird thing is, I keep thinking about moments when I should have known. Like how she never wanted to video chat with her father, or how she'd get nervous when her phone rang, or how she avoided going to Savannah. But I explained it all away because I trusted her. That's what love is, I said softly. Trust. She weaponized your capacity for love against you. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. I wanted it so badly, Mom. After Monica, I wanted to believe I could have that kind of love again. A real partner, a family. And she knew exactly what I needed and became that person. You will have it again, I promised. Real love, real family. But you need to heal first. You need therapy, time, support. Did you know, he said after a moment, that she cried when she talked about her mother dying? Real tears. How do you fake that? Practice, I said bitterly. Years and years of practice. The next morning, the story broke in the news. Massive romance fraud ring busted by FBI, read the headlines. Nathaniel's name wasn't mentioned. Agent Chan had ensured his privacy would be protected. But the details of the Volkov organization's operation were laid bare for the public. Over coming weeks, the full scope of their crimes emerged. Marissa and Dante had stolen over $4.2 million from their victims over the years. Lives had been destroyed. One previous victim had indeed committed suicide. Families had been bankrupt. And through it all, Marissa had moved seamlessly from one identity to the next, always charming, always convincing, always deadly. The trial took place 8 months later. I attended every day, sitting in the courtroom gallery while prosecutors laid out the evidence. Nathaniel couldn't bring himself to go, but he needed me to be his eyes and ears. Marissa looked different in court. Her auburn hair was gone, replaced with mousy brown. Without makeup and expensive clothes, she looked older, harder. But those amber eyes were the same, cold and calculating, as she listened to testimony after testimony about her crimes. When she took the stand in her own defense, she tried to play the victim, claimed she'd been coerced by Dante, that she was afraid for her life, that she'd been trapped in an abusive relationship. The prosecutors systematically destroyed every lie, playing recordings where she'd bragged about her cons, showing evidence of her eager participation in planning new scams. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Marissa Volkov was sentenced to 23 years in federal prison. Dante got 27 years. Marcus Thibault, the fake father, got 8 years for his role as an accomplice. The other women in their network received sentences ranging from 10 to 15 years.
I was in the courtroom when the judge read the sentence. Marissa's face remained blank, emotionless, as if this were happening to someone else. As she was led away, she looked directly at me. The only time during the entire trial she'd acknowledged my presence. I expected to see hatred, or anger, or even fear. Instead, I saw nothing. Just empty, cold calculation, probably already planning her next move, her next con, her next victim. But she wouldn't get the chance. Not for 23 years. Nathaniel took 2 years to fully recover financially. The FBI and various creditor agencies worked with him to separate fraudulent charges from legitimate ones. His credit was eventually restored. He sold the Myers Park house and moved into a modest apartment in Charlotte while he rebuilt his life. The emotional recovery took longer. He spent 18 months in intensive therapy, working through the trauma of being systematically deceived and manipulated. There were dark days. Days when he wondered if he'd ever trust anyone again, if he'd ever open his heart to love. But slowly, painfully, he healed. 3 years after Marissa's arrest, Nathaniel met someone new. Her name was Rebecca, and she was a teacher at a local elementary school. She was kind, genuine, and patient with Nathaniel's trust issues. She understood why he needed to take things slowly. When he brought her to meet me, I saw the difference immediately. This relationship was built on truth, on slow-growing trust, on real connection rather than manufactured perfection. "What do you think, Mom?" Nathaniel asked after Rebecca went home that first night. "I think she's wonderful," I said honestly. "I think she's real." "Yeah, she's real. It's strange, you know? With Celestina, with Marissa, everything felt too perfect, too easy. Every conversation was magical, every moment was like a movie. With Rebecca, it's just normal. We have awkward moments. We disagree about things. Sometimes conversations are boring. And somehow that feels more genuine than all of Marissa's perfectly crafted romance." "That's because it is genuine," I told him. "Real love isn't a performance. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes boring, but it's real." 2 years later, I attended Nathaniel and Rebecca's wedding. It was small and intimate, just close family and friends at a simple ceremony in my backyard. No expensive venue, no elaborate production, no lies. As I watched my son exchange vows with someone who truly loved him, someone who was exactly who she claimed to be, I thought about everything we'd been through: the betrayal, the investigation, the trial, the healing. Josephine attended the wedding too. She and I had become close friends through this ordeal, bonded by our shared determination to stop predators like Marissa. She'd lost some clients when word got out about her role in the investigation, but she'd gained something more valuable: the knowledge that she'd saved a family from destruction. "Thank you," I told her as we watched Nathaniel and Rebecca dance, "for caring enough to investigate, for risking everything, for giving my son a chance at real happiness." "Thank you for being brave enough to see it through," she replied. "A lot of people would have confronted her immediately and ruined the whole case. You did something incredibly difficult because you loved your son enough to protect him even when it hurt." Now, 5 years after that awful phone call from Josephine, I'm sitting in my living room watching my grandson, my real grandson, play with blocks on the floor. Nathaniel and Rebecca's son, Thomas, named after his grandfather. He's 2 years old, with his father's hazel eyes and his mother's gentle smile. Rebecca is pregnant with their second child. This pregnancy is real. I've been to doctor appointments, seen ultrasounds, felt the baby kick. Everything Marissa faked, Rebecca is living authentically. Nathaniel is happy now, truly happy. He's rebuilt his career, his finances, his life. The scars are still there. He's more cautious than he used to be, more careful about trust. But he's learned that not everyone who seems good is hiding darkness, that real people exist, that genuine love is possible. Sometimes I still think about that dinner at Marissa's house, wearing a wire while she planned my son's destruction. I think about how close we came to losing everything. And I'm grateful every single day that Josephine made that phone call, the wedding planner who saved my family. 6 months after the wedding, she said she needed to show me something. And what she showed me was the truth. Ugly, painful, devastating truth. But truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a beautiful lie.